Oh, perfect. That's everybody. All right. So, no, actually, this is good news. So it looks like a few of you guys are, a little bit more than half of you guys are actually new to real estate. That's good. This is a great introduction into the MLS side of things. For those of you who are not to worry, this class will include some information that I think you'll find beneficial as well. And it seems like most of you guys, oh, actually, everybody has used Matrix before. A couple of you guys are relatively new to it. That's no problem at all. For those of you guys who have used it a lot or more than you care to admit, um, don't worry, there's still going to be some good nuggets in here too, just to make sure that everybody's getting what they need. So first and foremost, when you guys are getting into Matrix, it's going to be the link right here on your MLS portal, the very first one. The reason why we have this in the very first spot is because this is in fact actually the most important element of the MLS. This is actually the titular MLS itself. All of the listing data that we have is going to be entered into here and then will be distributed out to other websites and so on. So when you guys first land on Matrix, it's going to bring up this little title bar up here at the top and a search bar down here. These are going to be following us everywhere we go in Matrix. I'm going to go ahead and expand the page out so that we're looking at a full screen view. And I'm also going to zoom us in just a little bit. I think that should be appropriate. All right. If you guys are having any trouble reading the stuff on the screen and need me to zoom it in further, just let me know, but I'm going to leave it at this setting for now. So the first page that we land on when we click on that link to get into Matrix should bring us to our home page. So again, even though these bars up at the top are going to be following us everywhere, this is where we're going to initially land. Now the home page consists of what are called widgets. There's going to be one that you cannot move up here at the top left corner called News and Alerts. This News and Alerts section will notify you of anything that's specific to you. So for instance, if you guys have a listing that's past the anticipated closing date or might be about to expire, or whatever the case may be, this is where you guys will see those notices. You're also going to see some things that are going to be posted here that are effectively just MLS-wide information that's needing to be sent out to people. So for instance, we very recently, as of Monday at noon, increased our public remarks character count to 2,000 characters. So we made sure that there was an announcement giving a little bit of an indication on how to actually use that function. So if you guys end up having any questions about that, you guys can always come back to this. You may have noticed as well that this one that was posted in July 19 of 2021 is still up there because we want to make sure that everybody sees that. So get what you can from those news and alerts. The rest of these widgets, though, can actually be moved around and manipulated to an extent. So for instance, if you guys would prefer to have your My Listings section be a little bit higher up, you can actually click and drag from the title bar to move those around into different positions. Just as a heads up, if you guys are doing this on a mobile device, so for instance, you guys have loaded this on your iPad or tablet of some kind, and you decide that you want to scroll down, clicking and dragging is the actual operation to move these. And when you click and drag to, scroll up and down on the screen, you may end up noticing that this readjusts where things are. So just be aware of that. There is no lock mechanism to prevent these from moving. Now, the layout itself is completely up to you. The only thing that's ever going to stay in place is going to be this news and alerts and the additional widget. You cannot get rid of those. The rest of the widgets, though, you guys can actually move around. You can minimize them. So for instance, if I don't always need to see what my market watch has on it, I can just minimize that real quick. It's the same thing that I've done with my carts section. So if I want to see the carts again, I can just click the expand button and that'll expand those back out for me. There's also an X button that's going to allow you to get rid of any of these widgets. So for instance, if I'm not using my carts too often and click on the X, it's actually going to send that to a section called additional. So as mentioned before, this is actually a widget that's going to stay on your screen no matter what else you make changes to. But just so you guys are aware, this is also going to be the storage space that allows you guys to get rid of things that maybe you're not using too often. So for instance, there is a Matrix Learning Lab tab or widget, home visit one. It's one that has my stats, recent visitors, recent use contacts. Notice If I'm wanting these to come back onto the screen, I'm just clicking and dragging them out from the additional and dropping them back onto the screen. And again, if I need to get rid of something, I hit the X, move my additional over here so it's a little more obvious. There's my matrix learning lab, home visit, hit the X, recent contacts, X. And again, it's just filling up that space down there at the bottom. Good to go. So I am personally a strong believer in this idea that setting up your workspace is going to be a really easy way to make sure that when you get into a system, you're immediately into the things that you need the most. For those of you guys who are into cooking, that's called mise en place, which is the idea that you get everything put into place before you even start doing the cooking. So when you guys are starting cooking with getting all of your hot sheets prepared or trying to find out what might have come back on the market or listings that might have expired recently, you guys can have all of that easily accessible, jump right back into your active listings, any of your incomplete listings you were working on, etc. So make sure that your layout suits your needs. There is no official format for this. There's no recommended way to do this. The recommendation is set this up how you think is going to be most useful to you. Now, there is one, at least I think this could be a strong recommendation, is leaving the search function up at the top. This search function actually serves a lot of different purposes, but the main one is going to be that when I get in here and I've got somebody that's telling me they have a listing that they want me to take a look at, if I ask for the address or the MLS number, I can put those in real quick. Now, it's important to note that this search function is broken down into just the house number, the street name, or an MLS number. You can also add in a status if you'd like, but I usually recommend leaving that empty. But when you're putting in the address for the property, the only things that you're actually going to be entering are the house number and the street name. So when you're putting in the house number, that's going to be pretty obvious. If this was 123 South Main Street, I'd just put the 123 right there. Whereas for the street name, this is where it gets a little weird. The street name, as far as Matrix is interested, is only going to be referring to the actual name of the street and not the street type. So add avenue, boulevard, street, road, all of that can be dropped off. And then any of the pre-directional or post-directional is also going to be left off as well. So again, this is 123 South Main Street. The only thing that I would actually enter into the street name would just be Main. So let's actually do a little bit more practical example. So I've got 33200. And as a little illustration here, if you guys end up having a street name that's a number, so like 151st Street, I would just type in 151, leave it at that. So when I run my search, this is going to show me all of the listings that have ever been entered into the system with those two elements of the address. Now you may end up noticing on here that I've got a bunch of residential properties, but then I'm also seeing a couple that are actually marked as land. So this is kind of the catch with this, is that you may end up putting in an address that's going to be just ambiguous enough or just common enough that it may end up showing things in a completely different place. This does happen to show that everything was in Coweta, so there might have just been one that's, in this case, maybe 33200 151st Street or East 151st Street, might not even include the South. But over here on the left-hand side, we can see everything has been sorted by the status. And then there's a secondary sort, which is redundant in this case. Everything's the same school district, which is the secondary sort. And then we also have the price. Now, these sort mechanisms are going to be something that we can modify. We'll talk about that a little bit more later. But I can see all of my closed listings up here. And since they're all in the same school district, they're actually going to be sorted here by price over on the right. So from the smallest to the largest. Then again, we see expired, smallest to largest, released, smallest to largest. Another note before we move on from this page, I also wanted to mention that every single listing that we have in the system will have its own independent MLS number. And that MLS number is typically going to consist of 7 digits. But I see a couple here that are actually 6 digits. So we've got this 800384 and 728755. Both of these are actually entered in a specific year. So the very beginning of each and every MLS number that you will see in our system is going to be what year that listing was entered. So for instance, this one right up here at the top was actually entered in 2008. And because 2008 has 2 digits here and one of them is a 0, it just drops that preceding 0. And then the same thing goes for this one that we see back in with a 7 at the beginning. It's 2007 that was entered. Again, preceding 0 was dropped. So if we were to look for any of the active listings today, that would actually be showing us a 2-2 because we're already about halfway through the year. So more likely than not, there's not going to be any listings left over from 2021, but maybe a handful here and there. But if you guys are looking for listing numbers now, a 2-2 at the beginning would be what you guys would notice. All right. Now we're going to talk a lot more about some of the other search functions and a little revisit here and there of the market watch, hot sheets, and so on and so forth. But before we do any of that, I want to make sure that if we're finding something in a search or spotting something that we want to send off to a client in a hot sheet or in the market watch, whatever the case may be, we want to make sure that all of our contact information is up to date and ready to go. So up at the top right corner, you're going to see this working as training agent. This is just the account that I happen to be on. You may end up noticing on yours, it'll say hello and then your name or welcome and your name, whatever. But up at the top right, there's going to be a little drop down arrow. When you click on that, there's going to be an option. Everybody should see these last 4: settings, help, mobile, logout. Click on the settings option. Now under the settings option is going to be my information. Now, if you guys don't take notes on anything else during this class, this is the one thing that I would strongly suggest that you guys go through the process of doing just to make sure that this is all correct and everything is ready to go. So again, go into the name up at the top, click on settings, and then head over to this My Information section. Now, the My Information section should automatically have some information in here already. Good news is all of this came over whenever you guys were doing, or whenever you guys initially got signed on. Now, there is going to be a couple pieces of information here and there that you'll need to fill in. So for instance, what your work number is, your cell phone number, stuff like that. But for the pieces of information that actually got imported over from our membership data, there's going to be a little override option over here to the right. So if you find that maybe the name that you had put in there is not exactly what you want, so like if you're officially Robert, but you want to go by Bob, I can click on this override option so that my bills will come to me as Robert, but then whenever I'm presenting myself to the world, I'm going to be going by Bob. So just make sure that you guys get this set up the way that you would want. But I should note, if you guys are seeing things in here that you don't want to have to hit the override for, it should actually just be changed completely. Get in contact with us over at the service desk or get in contact with our membership team directly and let them know that you guys need to update some pieces of information, whether that's your email, which office you work for, etc. Make sure that you guys have that information up to date. Now, the importance of this particular set of information is actually going to be found on the rest of these tabs. So I'm going to make sure to save any of the changes that I've made. And then let's head over to this header and footer tab next. Now the header and footer is only going to appear on prints that you guys make. We're going to be talking briefly about some prints a little bit later in class today. So we're going to actually get to see this in action. But I did want to let you guys know when you guys are actually setting this up, those pieces of information that we just set up on the information tab are actually going to be the branding that's going to appear up on the actual print header. So for instance, if I wanted to make sure that my cell phone number was on there, and I also wanted to make sure that my email address was on there, and then let's also add in my PO box. Sure. So as I was changing that drop down, you may have noticed that this was also changing the information that appeared up at the top. You can also upload a photo. So if you guys wanted to have that same headshot that you guys are using for the rest of your documentation, marketing, etc., make sure that that's up there. It's going to be under this photo section. And for those of you guys who have never been in here before, you may actually see something a little bit different when you get in. You just have to choose a template first. Once you guys have chosen the template, you'll get back to this screen. I should have actually mentioned this first. I apologize. If you do end up wanting to go back to change anything, though, you just click on this select a different banner image /theme, and you guys can see this massive list of just a ton of different options. Since this would be a beautiful place to live, I'm gonna go ahead and use that one, preview. And you notice that each time I've changed this, not only does the banner image change, but there's also some colors that are going to be changing over here. That can also be modified. So for instance, if you guys do end up having a fully customized theme that you would like to go for, you can upload a custom banner up here. You can change the colors to make sure that it's, the Keller Williams red or Coldwell Banker blue or whatever the case may be. And you guys can get that set up. But just as a reminder, this was a section that we used to spend a lot more time on because this was something that appeared in a bunch of different places. But now the only place that this shows up is on your prints. So get this set up however you would like. Don't spend too much time on this. It's not going to be that important. But let's head on now to the CMA cover sheet. This is another one that's going to not be that important because it's only going to appear on one report. It's the CMA report. And this isn't even just the quick CMA. This is the full CMA report. So there's only one place this shows up. Make sure that your basic information is in here. And let's head on to the email signature section. Now, since we are doing this by webinar, this is kind of a good thing. You're probably more than likely already on the computer that you're going to be using this on. So if you have access to your email, what I would strongly suggest doing is actually copying whatever email signature you're already using and just paste it in here. It'll remember all of the colors that you use, the fonts that you use, the size, whether it was bold, italic, whatever. And it's also going to keep all of the images as well. So when you guys actually paste that in there, it should already have the image put in. There used to be a way more complicated method to have to deal with that. Now you can just copy and paste things in there and you're done. Easy peasy. Now, the last tab on here is going to be One Home. The One Home section is the main place that you guys are going to have contact information that the client will see. It used to be that the header and footer would actually appear on the client portal, but now that we've actually moved to the One Home system, you guys will actually need to set up a profile that's only going to appear there. But since this is the main place that your contacts are going to end up actually interacting with anything that you're sending them, make sure that this is all up to date. There's a nice big section up at the top here to upload your photo. Just like I mentioned on that header and footer, use whatever your current headshot is. I can't stress this enough. If you guys are using different headshots or different photos wherever you guys are doing your marketing, it's going to cause problems with how likely people are that they'll remember who you are. The more repetition you have, the better it's going to be for people's brand recognition. So if you have a headshot that's fresh and the one that you've been using, make sure that that's the one that's on your Facebook. Make sure that's the one that's on your company website. Make sure that's the one that you guys are posting onto Matrix, so that everywhere they go, if they see the same exact image, they're going to be more likely to remember you. So very strong recommendation. That was a big thing for my marketing professor in college. He made sure to reiterate that over and over. It was like the repetition was the repetition. Anyway, a little bit further down, you've got some contact information put in here. Make sure that you guys load this up with all the different ways for people to reach out to you. Because again, when you send something through the Matrix system, it'll be using this One Home setup. So the actual client portal One Home. So all of this information is what they're going to be reaching back out to you by. So make sure you have all of the good stuff here. Make sure that they can get back into contact with you. And once you're done, make sure to hit that save button down at the bottom. All right. So now that we've gotten all of our information set up, all of our prints are going to be ready. When we produce a CMA, it'll have my contact info. And of course, any emails that I'm sending, no matter what kind of email it is, whether it's got a listing on it, a CMA on it, or whatever, it's always going to have the same thing that I see whenever I'm sending an email otherwise. And then my profile will be set up so that once they get into the email, try and take a look at any of the listings, they're going to see all of my contact information again, as well as that nice synopsis of who I am. So we're all set. Now we can actually go ahead and move forward with doing a search. I'm going to jump back to my home page here. I'm going to click on the My Matrix option up at the top to bring me back to that home page. So again, if I was running a search on this very basic home page, I've only got those two elements that we can search by. and then also add in a status if I wanted to double check that as well. There's the hot sheets and market watch, which are, again, pretty much just pre-formatted search functions that allow us to see what changes have been occurring either in a certain area or what changes specifically have occurred, and you can click into those. But if I'm actually going to be running a search for a client, I'm going to need to use this search tab up at the top. Now, I'm going to hold my cursor over this for just a second here so we can discuss what options are available. So right up at the top, we've actually got it separated out by the 4 different property types that you guys can enter into our system. We've got a residential search. If I hold my cursor over that, I can see a quick res. You'll also notice that immediately under my residential section is the quick res option. Once you guys have clicked on the residential quick res option enough, it'll actually just appear on your list. So for instance, if I got into commercial and was doing the quick commercial search all the time, it would actually appear on my list as well, the same way that my land and my lease are right now. But residential sales, I should say, residential sales, commercial sales, vacant land sales, and then residential leasing are the 4 property types that we allow. Just as a heads up, since this does happen to come up often, we do not allow you guys to enter commercial leasing, either in the commercial sales section or in the residential leasing section. So just make sure you guys are aware those need to go into a commercial information exchange. Our official support for the Connect CIE ends at the end of this month. If you guys are doing any commercial property stuff, we are now using the system Catalyst. That's our official recommendation for people. Anyway, there is also a 5th option for running searches for properties, and that's called the cross-property search. So for instance, if I didn't just want to see residential sales or vacant land sales, if I wanted to actually combine a search and get both options, that would be when we use this quick cross-property search. Now, our quick cross-property search is going to be laid out similar to the other search functions that we have. So this is going to be almost the exact same layout that you guys have when you get into the residential search, the commercial search. But an important note about the quick cross-property search is that this actually allows me to combine specific listing types. So in my case, I've got my property type. I'm going to choose the residential first, and then I'm going to hold down the control key and select land, acres, farms second. Now we're going to be repeating that particular instruction a lot later, but for those of you guys who are joining us on a Mac or use Macs at all, holding down the command key does the exact same thing. So it's a control click if you're on Windows, command click if you guys are on a Mac. But it just allows you guys to select multiple items on a list or deselect them if need be. All right, so I'm going to be doing residential and vacant land. I'm not going to choose a property subtype because if I do, that's going to artificially restrict these to just one property type. But I've got my 2 property types put in there. Say that I wanted to just see what was available in Ada for me. And when I go to my results, I'm going to see a whole bunch of properties mixed in with each other. So we've got the home here, we've got a residential lot here, another house, residential lot, acres, so on and so forth. We can see the property type is one column. The property subtype is another column. And then we've got some details about the school district, address, and then of course, bedroom, bathroom, et cetera, but only for the properties that are actually residential land or residential properties. All right, so let's actually jump back a step. I'm going to go back up to my search function here. Actually, we'll go back to our homepage, then back to our search function. There is an additional option that they added a couple of years ago. It's the public record search. The good news about this is actually a realist search that you guys can do within Matrix. So instead of having to restrict yourself to only being able to search for tax records in realist, they've recently added in this public record search that allows you guys to do pretty much all the tax record searching that you might want without having to leave Matrix. This is almost exactly as robust as what Realist does. So if you guys like the Matrix interface a little better, or even just don't want to leave Matrix and do your search anyway, you guys can actually still do that in here using that public record search. Now, there's also an agent search available to you. one of the things that I really love about this is that if I'm talking to somebody and they just told me that there was a specific property that they need me to take a look at, I can search for them using just their last name, their first name, or even just a portion of either of those. Once I find them, I click on their member number or member name over here to the side, and I'll see all their contact information, but most importantly, I can see what active listings they have. So if he had just contacted me about some property and I maybe bungled what the address was and couldn't find the listing again, not to worry. As long as I know who it was I just spoke to, I can probably find their listing. Additionally, we also have an office search. So let's just keep that theme going. We're going to do an office search. And this time I'm actually going to be doing let's just do solid rock, and I'm going to add an asterisk at the end. So I've got 6 matches. When I go to my results, I'm going to see each and every office that happens to match that. Just as a heads up, and I use this one as an example specifically, the businesses that you guys have in the area, so like Keller Williams, Coldwell Banker, Chenoweth and Cohen, or pretty much just any office that has multiple locations. If you search for that, you'll be able to see which offices they have. So for instance, Solid Rock has one, Claremore, Veneta, Broken Arrow, etc. So if I wanted to find out maybe which agent it was, so like they were like, oh, you know, I'm at the Solid Rock in Oolaga. Okay, so click on this Oolaga office, and I can see the agents within that specific office. And then I can also see any of the additional branch offices as well. But if I go into this office agents, it's going to show me all the people that are in that office. I can click on one of their names. And again, just like we saw when we were searching for just an agent, I can go into their active listings and find out what they've got available. So that's our agent search on our office search. We do have a data co-op option. I don't necessarily think this is of a lot of practical use unless you guys are actually near a border. And that can be any border. Just as a heads up, the people out in Oklahoma City are using Matrix, and the people that are out here in the Fort Smith area are also using Matrix as well. What that means is that when we get into this data co-op system, the data co-op is actually going to be showing us all of the different properties that are entered in any Matrix system in the country that is sharing that data. So it's kind of a bit of a quid pro quo situation where we share our data and subsequently others will share their data with us. So kind of a little bit of trust going on there, but let's say that you guys are near the border and you got an option over here to double check if there's anything just across the border that you'd like to have, or maybe there's somebody over in this area that also has an Oklahoma license but isn't part of our MLS. You can see those listings. Same thing goes with our neighbors over in the Oklahoma City area. We are working to set up a data co-op of some kind that's going to be a little bit more intimately connected inside Matrix. So instead of having to leave Matrix to get into this data co-op, we're good to go. Oh, and actually somebody just asked why we used the asterisk after solid rock. And I think I may have used it prematurely. If I'm not mistaken, if I just type in solid, it should actually, yeah, this is already a wildcard search, but we're going to talk about the asterisk a little bit later. This is actually a wildcard search to make sure that if we potentially have anything after this, so like if I didn't know if it was solid rock or solid rocker, whatever, I can put in an asterisk and it will just prevent me from having to worry about whatever the other information is. It's just going to say anything after the word solid is going to be acceptable. So when I go to my results, I'll see all of them. Good example would be if I was searching for, let's do Keller Williams. When I search for Keller Williams, there's going to be 23 matches. And this is actually going to show me Keller Williams Heritage, Keller Williams Platinum, Keller Williams Southeast Oklahoma, all that kind of stuff. So, but we're going to see that a little bit more practical use when we start getting into our residential search that we're going to be using in a bit here. But yeah, not to worry, we'll circle back around to that. In fact, actually, I'm going to leave your question open, so I make sure to mention it. Now, down at the very bottom of our search function, we have a more option. If you guys are looking for, let's say, any open houses that are available, or if you guys want to do a property search, which I'll show you guys in a moment, is no longer needed. But the open house search function is really handy. You guys can see if there's any public open houses that are available. You guys can run just basic search the rest of the way. My favorite way to actually check to see if this is actually helpful is I'm going to actually check to see if anybody has any refreshments. So we've got some public ones, they've got refreshments, and I'm going to make sure that I'm seeing them here in Tulsa. Perfect. Perfect. So we got 6 matches. If I go in here, it looks like we've got a couple here at the end of the month. So if you guys are needing a snack on the 30th or 31st, here's some options for you. Don't worry, I'm not actually coming to people's open houses just to eat their snacks that you know of. Anyway, so we're going to actually jump now into a regular search. So that's about it for our search functionality. I'm going to actually now whittle down into a little bit more practical search for you guys. When you first get into Matrix, if you guys are wanting to find a property, you go up to the search and head into the quick residential search. The create your own option, just as a heads up, is a completely blank one, and you have to add in all of the search features. The quick residential, as well as the other quick options, quick land, quick lease, quick cross property, etc., are going to be pre-formatted. So they're going to include the majority of things that you guys might actually be interested in. So for instance, the main thing that we actually make sure of is whenever you guys get into a quick search, the default is that it's only going to be pulling up things that are currently active. In addition, we have some other status options. As soon as you start checking those, there will be putting in specific date ranges. The default by at least our system is going to be 0 to 180. This is actually 0 to 180 days in the past. So the idea is that this is going to be something that's relative, so that if you guys ever need to search for properties that have closed, it's going to automatically be searching for properties that closed in the last 6 months. So no matter what day you do it on, rather than having to click on the calendar and choose a date range, etc. We also have a section here for the property subtype. Notice when we got into the cross property search, this property subtype list was massive. Because we're only searching within residential though, got a nice short list. There's a couple extra options down here at the bottom, whether the property is in a contingent status, whether corporate relocation is available, if it's in a short sale, if there's a bulk listing or multiple parcels available. And then this lender owned option, I wish we could maybe get that renamed, but this is technically what's happening. If the property is in any kind of foreclosure state, the lender owned option will have to be set to yes, which if you guys notice, thankfully there's not too many in our system, but if you guys ever need something in foreclosure status, lender owned is the option to choose. Now that's it for the left-hand side here. The middle though, if you guys notice, is almost entirely location based. We've got a map search up at the top. We've got a space to add in addresses. You can actually add in up to 10 different addresses. We've also got a section here for the school district, the city, county, zip code, township range, and section, which might be a little bit more beneficial for those of you guys who are working with vacant land of any kind. And then we've also got a subdivision, any schools that you guys might be interested in. And then down below that is going to be the end of the location information. These are just some extra elements. Now, what's interesting is that whenever you guys are running a search for maybe a different property type, the rest of this section up here at the top, all of this stuff right here in the middle is all going to be the same because the location search is universal. Everybody's going to need to use that no matter what property type they're using. The information that's down here towards the bottom, though, is actually something that will change depending on what kind of property you're looking for. So if I'm looking for vacant land, this is going to be a lot more focused on what you can use that land for, rather than, oh, does it have a pool on the property? Does it have a garage, etc. Now, finally, over on the right-hand side, we've got the numeric attributes of the properties. So instead of, what type it is or what location it's in or what attributes it has, this is going to be more interested in just the raw numbers. So what's the price? How many bedrooms? How many bathrooms? How many stories? What the square footage is, etc. Now, the price, as well as bedrooms, bathrooms, square footage, are all going to be using a couple basic functions. Now, the most obvious one is if we put into the price a range, what I'd be doing is typing in the base number first. So I'll say 200,000, and I want to go all the way up to 300,000. So I'm going to put in a hyphen and then 300. Now, I only entered 200 to 300. The reason is that anything that's been put in there will automatically be turned into thousands. So that little checkbox there is meant to allow you guys to just take whatever the number is here and not have to type in an extra 3 zeros every time. So I've got my number put in. Hey, look, there are Bob matches. If I wanted to check my bedrooms, I'm going to use a different element. So in this case, I actually want to make sure that I get at least 3 bedrooms, but if there's more bedrooms than that, that's perfectly fine. So in this case, I'm going to do 3 and then do plus. So again, it's going to check 3 as the base, plus is going to say find anything above that. If we wanted to do a little bit different for the total number of bathrooms, maybe we don't want too many bathrooms, which I don't think any client has ever said to anyone ever. But if we had a certain limit on bathrooms, we can do the exact opposite. So I'm going to do 3 minus. So what that means is that 3 is the maximum amount of bathrooms that we want to see, and I'm going to have the minus to indicate anything below that is acceptable. So just think of those plus and minus whenever you guys need to. This also works for the price range. So again, if you guys wanted to find those 1.5 million properties or higher, you can just put in 1500 plus, and again, that's automatically going to add in those 3 zeros afterwards. So this becomes 1.5 million, and I can see I got 37 matches in here, which is pretty surprising. I would expect that if a house was 1.5 million, that it would have likely more bathrooms. This number seems to be pretty large. Anyway, the next thing I wanted to mention is actually down here under stories. This is going to seem a little peculiar, but there is actually an option to put in percentage, or effectively like a ratio is actually what the intention is for the number of stories. So the number of stories on a house is actually technically supposed to be measured by the ground floor. So if the ground floor of a property is 1,000 square feet, and the second story is 500 square feet, that would be a 1.5 story house. Technically speaking, I think this is kind of the shorthand for this. So if you guys have a property that's, 1,500 square feet on the ground floor and then only 1,000 square feet on the second floor, you don't have to go in there and do a bunch of math. Oftentimes people will just put in the 1.5 to indicate that this isn't a true 2-story house. A 2-story house would actually be qualified by having the same square footage on the ground floor as the next floor up. That would be 2 stories officially. But none of that really matters. 1.5 is the shorthand. You're not going to find too many other things. I do think we have somebody that was being cheeky in the system and actually put in a 0.9, which is, I think somebody tried to use this. I think we cleared all of those out. Oh, we do still have some people being cheeky. Let's see what we got. How many stories is this? Oh, number of stories is 0. Okay, so this one is actually a flat house. The effect of seeing it actually in 3D is an optical illusion. It's actually flat, just so you guys are aware. Anyway, we did have somebody put in a 0.9 for the stories one time because it was a single-story house, but it had a low ceiling. And so they thought, well, since the ceiling's only 7 feet high, I'm going to put in a 0.9 because it's not even a full story. But that isn't technically applicable. Please don't put that in there. Anyway, we also have a house square footage. The house square footage is actually one that we're going to need to linger on for a moment here. So the house square footage is actually only going to be allowed to be entered with one of 3 different sources. So first and foremost, if you guys have courthouse records, excellent. That's going to be the main source that we would prefer. But for those of you guys who are working with new construction, you guys can also use the building permit. So if you guys have a copy of the building permit, again, it's important to note, you have to have a copy of the building permit. You can't just put in that number and hope that nobody ever asks you about it. But if you guys put in a copy of the building permit as the square footage, that's acceptable. Also, if you have a copy of the appraisal, that will also be acceptable. But if you don't have one of those sources, so the courthouse, building permit, or appraisal, you're going to have to put in that you're not reporting a square footage. So when I get into my house square footage here, if I'm looking for properties that maybe don't have those official sources, I'm going to just put in a 0. Now, again, just like my little bad joke here with this number of stories, the house does not have no square footage. This isn't some kind of Harry Potter house where you open the door and suddenly there's a whole bunch of space. This is actually just indicating that these 206 listings that we have right now actually do not have a valid source of information. Now, what that could mean is that, let's say that I'm searching in Ada and I've got 2 matches there. If my client's searching for properties in Ada and I want to make sure that I don't end up missing any, if I've got the house size specifications from my client, I can put in that house size and then also put in a 0 at the beginning with a comma to indicate that I want to see all of the properties, even the ones that don't have an official source. Now, the reason why we recommend that you guys actually do this is if you guys do end up getting into one of these listings, let me back up one step, there we go. If you do get into one of these listings, they do have the option to actually indicate what the house size is. So even though this one, for whatever reason, doesn't have this reported, you can also indicate the house size, which doesn't appear either of these have decided to opt for. Let me switch this over to, I actually, you know what, Broken Arrow, I bet Money has some good ones. There we go. All right, so we're gonna jump in here. I'm gonna head to, this one's 500,000. That hopefully has it. Yeah, there we go. So this one actually looks like it's a little bit large for my client's specifications. They wanted it between 2,000 and 2,500. But in this case, it's 25 to set 27. But that's okay. This is just an estimate. So the good news is that even if you guys don't have an appraisal, builder's permit, or the courthouse records are incorrect for some reason, you guys can still indicate the house size on there. So again, what I did was I included any that still had 0 for the square footage. It just means I'm going to have to do some extra legwork to research all of those extra listings, but at least that way I'm not missing something that my client might be interested in ultimately. All right, a little bit further down, I wanted to also mention the location search functions. So I've been using these a little bit kind of sporadically. So when I'm going through and I'm actually taking a look at the school district and the city, there's a space up here at the top to start typing in any of the school districts I might be interested in. So for instance, if I wanted to do Ada, and then I also wanted to include the neighboring one that's Lada, I can type in both of those and just separate those out with a comma, the same way that we did with the house square footage. Now, if I wanted to make sure that all of these were in Ada proper, I can either click on Ada or type in Ada up at the top here. Now, we also have the option, just like we did with the property subtype I mentioned earlier, hold down the control key to select multiple items at once. But I would suggest if you guys are actually wanting to get multiple in there, comma option is great. There's actually a little button to the right of the city, school district, county, and zip code that allow you guys to get a pop-up that give you a full search function. This is way easier to use. I'd much prefer to have you guys using this function instead. So in this case, I wanted to make sure I got Ada. I select it, I click add, and it shows up under my current selection. I'll do Lada as well. There we go, select it, add, and I'm good to go. So now that I have both of my school districts I'm interested in, I click OK, and I'm all set. But you guys don't have to go through all that rigmarole. If you guys would like to just keep it really simple and start typing in a city name, it'll most likely find it pretty quick and easy. And I can also add in additional ones if I wanted to do Tahlequah as well, maybe get McAllister, and so on. So notice anytime I'm typing these out, it's just grabbing whatever the first one is that matches that. So just as a heads up, those of you guys who might live in a city that has the same spelling as another city's beginning. So for instance, Ada and Adair. If I want to get Adair, I got to make sure I have to type it out until it actually selects the correct one. So just keep that in mind. Make sure that you're double checking what it's actually selected. Now we're going to circle back around to something we mentioned earlier, and that's going to be the asterisk. The asterisk is going to be your best friend if you guys are searching for a subdivision. So the asterisk is what's called a wildcard search. And what that means is that whenever we get in to look for a subdivision, I'm going to be adding an asterisk at the beginning, type in the name of the subdivision I'm interested in, and an asterisk at the end. So what this wildcard is doing at the beginning is making sure that if it was the Turtle Creek or estates at Turtle Creek or something fancy, it's not going to care. It's only going to be searching for Turtle Creek. If I put the asterisk at the end, again, what that means is that nothing at the beginning matters, and this one, nothing in the end matters. Sorry, not a Linkin Park joke there. But again, what this is actually showing is that it doesn't matter if this is Turtle Creek resub 12 amendment 5 or whatever. It's just going to be searching for Turtle Creek. As long as those two words appear in that order, that's the subdivision search that I'm running. And as you guys can see, I've even got my 3 matches up. Now there is one caveat with doing the wildcard search. If I head into my map, I may end up finding that I've actually got a little bit of a fracture here. So there's actually a little Turtle Creek that's a little bit over in Broken Arrow proper, and then there's one that's on the outskirts of Broken Arrow. Now in this case, I might actually be intending to do the Broken Arrow that's out here instead. So you may end up wanting to either combine that subdivision search with maybe a zip code, or we do have the option to go into the map, which we're going to be covering in the second half of class, to try and talk about how to actually narrow down our search results to maybe just this one over here. But we're going to cover that a little bit more in depth in a bit. So once we've actually gotten all of our search criteria entered, so let's actually just put in some basic details, 2500 to 3500. We'll get a 4+, 3+, and let's do Broken Arrow. How about? There we go. I got 11 matches. There's a couple different ways for us to double check that we've actually got the right stuff. So just as I mentioned before, we can click on the map to make sure that we're searching in the right area. So I see all the listings, those little dots on here indicating where the active listings are. But I also have the option to go directly into the results. So if I click on the results button down here at the bottom where my live count of results was, or if I click up here at the top where my results button is, this is going to bring us back to our result page. I happen to have been looking at a listing already, so I'm going to click this single line display button up at the top here. Now, this is what the default results page will look like. If you guys are curious about that, you guys can always hit this reset to system search defaults, and it'll actually reset it back to the exact same view that I'm looking at right now. We're going to talk about how to customize that in a moment, but again, we've got our MLS number over here on the side, our status with the primary sort, that big thick arrow here. Got our secondary sort, which is the school district here. And then finally our price, which is a tertiary sort over here. If I want to make changes to which one is being sorted, I can actually click on that, and that will become my primary sort. But notice what happened here is that as soon as I clicked on a new primary sort, it made whatever was my primary previously into the secondary, and whatever my secondary was into the tertiary. So it actually removed the price sort and set it up with just the bedroom sort, then status, then school district. Let's say that I click on full bathroom. Notice my bedroom is now the secondary and status is now sorted as the tertiary. So you can kind of think of this as kind of trailing along with you as you travel through all of these sort functions. So if you do have a specific sort method that you'd be interested in, the easiest way for us to do that would actually be to select whichever one you want as your third sort first. So for instance, if I wanted to have my half bath be my tertiary sort, I'm going to click on that first. Then as soon as I want my full bath to be the secondary, click on that second. And then if I want my bedroom count to be the first primary sort, I'm going to click on that third. So now I've got primary sort, secondary sort, tertiary sort. So you guys can also reverse those orders if you would like. So if you guys wanted to have full bathroom, but you wanted it to be largest to smallest, you can change those around. Just as a heads up though, whenever you guys click on the sort function, it's actually going to be making that your primary first, and then you have to reverse the order to show largest to smallest or whatever. All right, now let's also do a quick overview of just some of the options that are available on this results page. And then we're going to take a 10-minute break because me talking for 2 hours straight is probably not what everybody wants. So over on the far left-hand side, we've got the MLS number. As you guys have probably noticed, both in your own usage and while I've been going through this class, clicking on the MLS number is actually what loads you into the listing's details. If I need to exit back out to see my results, I click on this single line display up at the top. That brings me back. I can click on the next one, single line display. But if instead of actually going back to the single line display, there's also going to be a next and previous option that allows you to navigate between those. All right, I'm gonna head back. We also have a view photos button. This is really handy because it allows us to kind of get a preview of the property in advance. We also have a view map option. This is going to give us a pop-up that actually gives us a contextual map. So we can kind of see where this particular property is rather than having to go back to that map function and try and find which one it was that I was just looking at. There's also some extra features that we'll be discussing a little bit later. Most importantly, the FEMA flood zones. You guys are probably going to be really hyped about that one. So that's going to be our view photos and then view map. Coincidentally, you guys notice that there is a link here on the address. This is actually going to give us direct access to the map the same way that we just got when we clicked on the map icon. So clicking on the address does the same thing as clicking on the map icon. Now there's some extra icons over here to the right, and thankfully I have at least one in each column, so this is good news. I'm going to go to history on this first one. What this is going to do is actually, let me take myself out of full screen for a second so we can see the tabs up here at the top. When I click on this to history, it's going to open up a new tab, and it's going to show me every single time that this particular property, not this particular listing, but this actual address, this property itself, has ever been listed within our MLS. For those of you guys who might be in a different area, so for instance, we recently had the Southern Oklahoma Board of Realtors down in Ardmore join us. We've got Ada, Texoma, SOAR, and then the original one that joined us was actually Bartlesville. They actually just merged with GTAR, but every time we have another MLS join us and become a part of our roster, they end up providing over some of the historical data. So you may notice, like, especially with those of you guys in Ardmore, you guys provided us with 5 years worth of back data, which was fantastic. But one small catch with that is that they might end up showing up with some weird numbers, and they might not show as much detail to all the changes that have occurred. But pretty much anything else in our system, all the way back to 1992, when we first started digitizing our MLS records, you guys should be able to find when the listing was entered, all the way down to the exact minute. Anytime the price was changed, increased, decreased, whether it was released, withdrawn, went pending, went back on the market, whatever the case may be, you guys can keep track of that here. This is a great way to also find out what's happening with maybe pricing schemes. So for instance, this one went up $400 apparently, and then went back down again, and then went back down again. Once the market starts to get back to a quote unquote normal, this is also a great way to find out what's happening with maybe pricing schemes. So like, for instance, this listing might have been in the system for a really long time and subsequently had a few price drops. Maybe there was a schedule to that. Maybe there was a reason to why the prices were being dropped. And that could actually become valuable to your client that you're working with. If you got a buyer, you can actually see that, hey, you know, it looks like they're changing the price on a monthly basis. Maybe we can just offer them what the price might be dropping to next month now and just say, hey, we've got cash in hand. You're probably going to drop it down to this price next month. How about we just take it off your hands immediately? So a good negotiation tool. We are also hoping to include some extra information in here, but I'm going to leave it at that. We need to double check that that's all going to be happening in the near future. I'm hoping it does. It'd be very beneficial for you guys. We also have an icon here for start a transaction. For those of you guys who work with Transaction Desk, this is an easy way to make sure that you guys can just grab all the data from a particular listing and start making that offer letter immediately. So it's really handy. It grabs the address from the property. It's going to import all of the information over. So I set myself as the selling agent because I'm doing a residential sale. And when I start that transaction, it's already going to have the photo. It's already going to have all of the property's details, even the list price that's in there. And when I get over here to the section with our contacts, I'll even get to see the listing agent's information and their office information. So by the time I start filling out forms, all of this information is good to go. Don't end up having to manually enter anything. So that's our start a transaction button. You'll notice that every single listing has that, and every single listing has a to history. We also have a view documents button. Coincidentally, this is also in Transaction Desk, but the view documents is where you guys can see all of the property condition disclosures, etc. Anything that the listing agent would like to share with you guys. Now there's another icon here that's only present on one of these. Looks like there's an open house that's going to be hosted for this one on Albuquerque Street. And this is, oh, apparently in the past. So they already had their open house, but this is what the icon will look like. If you guys do end up spotting one that has the open house, you can click on it, find out when it is, what the details are, whether this is a broker open house or a public open house, whether there's refreshments or not, etc. We also have icons here for what are called virtual tours. So in addition to the actual photos that you guys can upload, there's also an option to do virtual tours. Now these can be, glorified slideshows like they have on Tour Factory, or you guys can get really fancy if you guys have a Matterport option. This one, no, this is just a gallery. Let's see. Oh, and another Tour Factory option. That's a pretty house. But you guys can put in a huge variety of different options for the virtual tour, whether it's that virtual dollhouse or the slideshows, whatever. Just as a heads up, every single virtual tour that gets entered into our system is required to be unbranded. So just as a reminder, that means no mention of your name, no mention of your office, no contact information for either of those, and no company logos anywhere or anything. It has to be completely and utterly unbranded. We do have to monitor those, so we will actually go through and verify that the virtual tours that are being uploaded are the unbranded version. So just keep that in mind. Also, since some of you guys upload video virtual tours, if you don't mind, maybe some Led Zeppelin or I don't know, Enya, Celine Dion, just something besides that really tacky music that they have sometimes. It's just, since we have to, watch all of those, it might be nice to have some nice music from time to time. So anyway, get some Green Day for us. That'd be cool. We also have a link here for RPR. For those of you guys who are not aware, RPR is actually the Realtor Property Resource. This is a tool that's been provided by the National Association of Realtors. This is something that you guys got as soon as you became licensed realtors, and every listing in our system should have a link to RPR to pull up the report for that particular property. There is an absolute ton of information that's available through RPR. They have over 350 different sources of information. So you guys can find out all sorts of details about this property and then even create these beautiful reports with your name, your company logo, everything that you send out to the client. I cannot recommend RPR enough. I think it's literally the best product that we have available to you guys. And it's not even something that we're giving you through the MLS. It's something that you guys have as realtors. All right, well, that's enough of our review of the results page. Let's go ahead and shift gears and do our break. I'm going to put some music back on and have our video back on the screen. As soon as the music stops and the video disappears, we are going to resume. Make sure that you guys are back. It is currently 10:06. Well, in a couple seconds here, it's 10:06. So make sure that you guys are back, and we will go ahead and get back started. All right, so we're going to go ahead and jump back in. So where we left off was we were taking a look at our search results. Let's do a little brief overview of what each of the different listings. Oh yeah, here, I'll go ahead and hit that lower hand option. Thank you, Jessica. All right. So when you guys are actually interested in taking a look at a specific listing, as mentioned before, you click on this little MLS button over here to the left. This will bring you into that specific listing. And we mentioned already that you guys can use that next and previous option to kind of navigate in between each of the different results. Or you can click on the single line display to return you back to your page. But when you're looking at a listing, there's going to be a separate set of tabs that are right up here at the top that are going to be specific to each and every listing. So this listing tab right at the very beginning is going to show you all the details that the listing agent had entered whenever they put this listing into the system. This is going to include basic facts about the property itself. We've got some list details, what the list price per square foot is, what the style is, the square footage, the house size estimate, how many stories it is, so on and so forth. Again, as we mentioned towards the beginning of class, we very recently updated the total number of characters you guys can use on the public remarks to 2,000. So many of you guys may have remembered seeing the public remarks appearing directly underneath the legal. It's now been moved to its own section because you can practically write a little novella underneath each of the listings. 2,000 characters is a lot. That is a pretty substantial amount. So we've got the basic attributes about the house itself underneath that, where all the gas, water, and heating is coming from. And there's going to be a section here called additional rooms. This is where you guys can enter the room details for each of the properties that you guys have. Now, this may seem like a kind of trivial thing. It's not even required, but what I would very strongly suggest is that on each and every listing that you guys have, at least mention a couple basics. So make sure you mention what room the master bedroom is on, or what floor the master bedroom is on, any of the amenities and stuff like that you can include if you would like. But most importantly, make sure you guys are mentioning where the bedrooms are and where the bathrooms are. Now, the reason I say this is because you may end up having people that are looking for something specific. So for instance, in my parents' case, both my parents have relatively limited mobility, but my mom especially has arthritis. So she's definitely not going to want to go up and down stairs all the time. So when they were initially looking for houses, they didn't care if it was going to be 2 stories. The most important thing, though, was that the master bedroom was on the first floor. So this is a key element for some people's search, which means that if you guys don't even include any of those additional rooms, because again, they're not required technically, you may end up having a perfect house for someone that just won't even get witnessed because you just didn't include that key element of their search. And that kind of goes for pretty much all of the other pieces of information on listings. Make sure that you guys give as much information as you can, because by the time somebody's actually searching for it, that piece of information might be the critical detail that they're looking for. So a little bit further down, we've got some basic details about the HOA, the tax information, and then of course a huge section down here at the bottom that other agents will not be able to see. Ooh, actually look, a violation. So if you guys are coming into the system and wanting to get in contact with this particular agent, you've got an office phone number, you've got some details about it, broker remarks, etc. This directions section down here at the bottom is the violation. Just as a heads up, you guys cannot put in that GPS will take you to the house. You got to put in directions. I know this is going to sound like a really bizarre statement, but there are a lot of agents that are still working on flip phones and don't have a GPS that they can use. And I know that sounds really bizarre in 2022, but I mean, I know somebody personally that is still using maps and has a flip phone. So just make sure that you guys are putting in information that's relevant for stuff. And actually, since we have this kind of unfortunate opportunity, I might as well mention there is a report a violation button right above where you guys have the photos that you can scroll through. So if you do end up in a situation where you've spotted something that's just, an error, or maybe something that they didn't mean to make an error or omission on, we still strongly suggest that you guys get in contact with the agent and let them know. But understandably, that's an awkward conversation to have, to tell them, hey, by the way, you're not supposed to have a photo of the interior of the house as the primary photo, or uh, it looks like you've got some information that's missing that might be really important. In this case, since we've got a legitimate violation, I'm just going to click this report a violation button and then just choose whichever one happens to be closest, or just grab one in general and just say um, directions, mention GPS, directions. Now, an important note about reporting violations. So if you guys have contacted the agent, they're not willing to do anything, or you couldn't reach them or whatever, this is not punitive. If you guys end up reporting a violation, this is just letting us know that we need to reach out for them. From the MLS side of things, we try to focus on getting educational stuff done. We're not trying to just go out here and just be like, oh, you put in bad data, here's a fine. We are actually trying to make sure that there's good data in the system, and that we try and make sure that that's not a problem that perpetuates itself. So in this case, we're going to reach out to them, just let them know, give them, again, that same statement I said before, that, not everybody has a GPS, so you can't trust that that's going to be the only option available to people. It also does mention here that I'm the one that's reporting this, so the training agent account is the one that's reporting this. This is information that only goes in our system and is never given to the agent. We do not discuss who it was that reported it. More often than not, we're actually keeping track of all of this information on the back end anyway, so there's a very good chance that any violations that we're calling about were not reported by someone. Those are violations that the system caught and subsequently we're reaching out about. So if you guys do end up in that awkward situation where you've got a violation that you need to report, again, first step would be to reach out to them, try and do it in an amicable, cooperative way. And if that's not working, or if you can't reach them, that report a violation isn't going to be something that they, get a mark on their record or lose points from their license, or I don't know. Some people have some weird perceptions of how the violations work. You don't have to worry about that. Anyway, immediately below the photo, we also have a couple extra buttons. There is a view photos button, which is obsolete because we have a button right here for that. We got a view map option. Wait a second, we got two map options up here at the top. To history, wait a second. I'm starting to notice a trend here that most of the most important things on here, tax record information, taxes up here, is all loaded up to the top here. So these tabs up at the top are actually called Matrix 360. So this is a great way to just try and navigate between these without having to click on extra buttons to do so. Because this is going to bring us to a new tab, or new window, new pop-up, whatever the case may be. Now, we also have a couple extra buttons for a system called the Realtor.com professional search. It's not quite as good as some of the other systems you guys have available, like RPR, for instance. We do have a link to the virtual tour, data co-op, which again, RPR is going to be the superior option to that. We've got a couple links here for the lock boxes. If there was an open house, that open house would be showing down here, and there'd be an icon for it. There's also a start a transaction button. Again, that same link that we saw before for the disclosures. And then this one actually also includes a connection to showing time. So if you guys wanted to schedule a showing, you can click that button and you'd be good to go. So let's actually review those tabs that I was just mentioning. The tax tab is going to be pulling over information directly from Realist. The Photos tab is going to show us all of the photos in a nice little thumbnail view. Click on one of them. You can scroll through those. You can even turn on a slideshow presentation. So if you guys have a client that's taking a look at this over your shoulder, you can show them that. We also have a History tab. Again, this history is going to be for this particular property. But remember earlier when I clicked on that little clock icon, it actually opened up a new tab on my browser, I should say. Whereas this one just allows me to stay on this same window and just navigate in between all of these. The parcel map option is actually going to show 3 different views. This is really cool. We've got a satellite image that has a little purple highlight where this particular property is located. And we've also got one that shows the parcel's dimensions. And then we also have a map down here at the bottom that you can add extra details to. So if I wanted to see what the zip code was, the city was, the county, the school district, neighborhood, etc. Now, I'm intentionally leaving off the options there for the flood zones, because if I scroll up to the top of the page here, there's actually a separate flood map that's been built in here. One of the coolest things about this is that this is actually going to show you the FEMA designation for this property according to the tax records. So rather than having to take a look at the map and kind of guess like, oh, well, this might be in this particular area or might be in that particular area, whatever, you don't have to worry. You guys have the information shown right up here at the top of the page. Again, it's got that little purple highlight to try and show you where the property is physically located in case there is any overlap with some of the FEMA designations. Additionally, if you guys are working in Tulsa County, there's another layer that you can add called the Tulsa flood zone. This is going to indicate to you guys where Tulsa County has actually predicted that there would be any kind of substantial flooding. Since it appears that I might be a little bit farther away from some of that, I don't see those red lines appearing. Oh, there they are. Oh, yeah, I was outside of Tulsa County. There we go. Or Tulsa City. Anyway, these were actually added after our gigantic, once every 500-year floods that we had in 2019. So strongly recommended if those of you guys who are working in Tulsa proper. All right. And then there is a foreclosure tab as well. So if you guys end up in a situation where you're needing to learn more about the foreclosure status, if it's in a lis pendens status, if it's owned by the bank, what the court records are on all of that. So all of that's under the foreclosure tab. Anyway, another cool thing about this is that if you guys do end up switching to one of these tabs, the next and previous option will actually move you in between the tabs on each of those listings. So this is actually the next listing on my list, and I can see here I am with all the photos. Go back to the history, cool, move to the next tab, and it's going to show me the history for that listing. Sometimes this gets confusing for people, so just as a reminder, click back on listing before you start navigating around, just to make sure you're not getting kind of lost there. All right, I'm going to head back to my single line display. And the last thing we want to talk about with the results page before we actually move on to discussing how to use the map search is I wanted to briefly discuss how you guys can rearrange things. So when you're looking at your results page, you can click and drag on some of these columns to move them to different positions. So if you guys find a maybe element that you want to move to the front because I prefer to see my address and then my school district, or I want to make sure that my price is showing up in a different location, you can just click and drag those to your heart's content. Once you guys have settled on a layout that you like, you can save that by clicking on this Set Clear Defaults. And you can set this as your default so that the next time you open this, it'll be the exact same layout. If you don't want to do that, there is also the Reset to System Search Defaults, which makes sure that everything gets arranged back in the same way that it was when you first got into the system. And it also puts back all of these sort functions as well. Now, let's say you guys end up wanting to do a little bit of a customization to this. So like I wanted to add in a column for the acres, for instance. What I'm going to do is actually, instead of clicking and dragging to move things around, I'm going to click on that gray space to the right of one of these column headers. And it actually brings up a little drop down here. So remove column, we'll just get rid of this one. Insert column will actually insert to the right of whatever column I clicked on. So in this case, I'm going to do insert column. I'm going to scroll down and get my acres and hit apply. So now this actually has added in an additional column showing me the acre count. Now, if I like this layout, but I don't want to save this as my default, maybe this is just something that I do one-off every once in a while for the larger properties I'm working with, I can actually save this as a specific display that I can use for future. I've got the Manage Display button. It's this little pen with the the pen with the notepad behind it, manage display. And I'm going to say simple with acres. Perfect. And then save as a copy. And that way, the next time that I'm actually wanting to see this exact same layout, there's a display dropdown up at the top here. And the one that we were just on was simply the single line. That brings us back to our default. And then we can switch over to my houses, subs, and acres, showing the subdivision in acres, or the one that I just created, which was the simple with acres, brings me back to that same exact layout. And again, it'll also remember how many pages you had. It's going to remember what the sort order was, remembers a lot of details about that. All right, so we're going to be talking about these actions down here at the bottom, but let's actually navigate back now to our criteria. We're going to start from a blank search. Now, a quick note about the clear function down here at the bottom of the page. When I hit clear to clear off all of my results and actually get back to just the empty page, what clear does is actually clears all of the criteria, including the one default that I think everybody should be aware of, and that's active. So if you guys do end up in a situation where you want to just start a brand new search, I usually recommend to people that you just go back up to the top and just click on quick res, and that'll get you back to the basic settings, the default settings, because that actually includes the active option. Whereas if I hit clear, clear is actually going to take off active as well. Anyway, so let's say that I get into my search and I just have a specific neighborhood in mind. So I'm not particularly interested in clarifying a price, bedrooms, bathrooms, whatever. I just want to jump into the map and immediately start drawing on the map to find a specific area. There's two different ways for us to do that. We've got the map buttons that are up at the top and bottom of the page. And then we also have the map search option, which also includes a little proximity search function as well. Now the proximity search function is really basic, so we're going to cover that first. So I'm going to say within 1 mile of, I'll just use ORU. I'm going to type out a portion of the address, let it sit for just a second, just like I did there, and then it shows up with a little auto correct. I click on that. It's going to show me map area selected. This map area selected is what's going to show up whenever we've used the map to indicate where we want to be. So now if I go into the map, I can actually see that there's a dot right there, smack dab in the center of ORU, and then it's got a mile radius search around that. If I go back to my criteria and actually want to clear that map off, I'll hit clear map, and that gets rid of all of the shapes that are on the map. Now let's try the alternative option. So rather than just limiting ourselves to just a really super basic search, if I actually want to do the drawing on the map myself, I'm going to click on map search or the map button, and that brings me into where the map can be seen. Now at the moment, I'm zoomed in enough that I can see all of these little green dots indicating where each of the different listings are. In case you guys actually just jump directly into the map search, you're probably going to end up with a default look like this. This is going to show large clumps of listings. So for instance, if I wanted to see all of the stuff over here in the prior area, I'm going to click on that clump. It's going to zoom me in. Click on the clump again. It's going to zoom me in a little bit further. And you're only going to start seeing those green dots as soon as there's 500 or less dots on the map that you see. So in this case, you guys can see that I've got 236 of those listings that are available in the system right now are showing up on my map view right now. So if I wanted to maybe narrow down my search down into this area here with just prior proper, that's when we're going to start getting into these tools up at the top of the page. So first and foremost, we've got draw radius. So I'm just going to click and drag and draw from the center of prior. But you may notice that this is going to include kind of a little bit extra beyond what I might want. Now I can get rid of the shape just by clicking on delete shape. Or if I just want to get rid of all of my shapes, there's actually an eraser button up at the top. Let's do a rectangle instead. So I'm going to click on the rectangle. You'll see that it turns yellow. Draw my shape around it. We're good to go. So notice what's happening is anytime I add in a shape, it gets rid of all of the other listings that are in the surrounding area. So the only thing that's actually included are the listings within that section. Again, I can do the delete shape with the red dot, or I can hit that clear shapes. I'll get rid of it. If I do a draw polygon one, this is going to be a little bit easier to use than I think the other ones are, because you can actually draw a very specific shape without having to worry about having a steady hand. So I'm going to click in one spot that actually starts the beginning of a line. But you notice that this line is actually just a little bit like transparent. You can see that the highway is actually a little bit visible underneath it. As soon as I click, it actually solidifies that line. And now it's a solid blue line. And now I've got a new line that's emerging from that click that I just did. So that corner that I just created. I'm going to click down here towards the bottom, click over to the side, and then click all the way back up here to the initial click. So I've made myself just a little bit of an unusual rectangle. If I click on any of these lines, I can actually start adding in extra corners. So if you guys wanted to kind of customize your shape even further, you can do so even after the fact. So you can make these really nice, complicated search functions for the clients that have really unusually specific needs. So if you guys ever need that, very handy feature. But a lot of times people are going to be a lot more fond of this freehand polygon tool. Now we can have multiple shapes on the map. So I'm going to click on that freehand polygon tool and just grab this area over here where there was a couple extra listings. I'm going to use my rectangle tool to grab a listing that's over here. And let's move down the map. And I'm actually going to grab some stuff over here in the Sportsman Acres community, if there was any. Oh, there they are. Also, if you guys want to move the actual shapes you've drawn, click and drag on the red dot. So now I've got some extra shapes on my map. Again, if I want to just get rid of all of them at once, hit that eraser. I'm actually going to redraw it just with those. Perfect. All right. Now, once we've gotten our shape drawn, our criteria can be filled in after the fact. So for instance, if I just wanted to draw the shape and then come back later and just say, all right, I want 150 or more. Or maybe I wanted to do 150 to 250. And I got 15 matches. So you can start adding those in after the fact. And again, it's only going to search within the area that you've drawn on the map. So just the same way that you guys would experience if you had just chosen to search within a specific school district or within a specific city or zip code. It's just that instead of it using some geographic definition, it's going to be using your definition with that shape. All right. So that should be it for our map search. I did actually want to address a couple extra functions that you have available to you on the map. If you guys have navigated away from wherever your initial search was, there's a recenter option that'll put you back so that you can see where it was that you were just looking. There's also the layers option. The layers option is going to have some restrictions on it. You're going to have to zoom in pretty close for a couple of these to be turned on. So the parcel is not going to show up until you zoom in to a certain level. And you're not going to be able to add the FEMA flood zones until you've zoomed in enough as well. So if I zoom out, it may end up leaving some things on, or it might just clear it all off. So you notice that's kind of the threshold that I'm at right now. But it's a whole bunch of extra options here. I would actually suggest reviewing those at some point just to see what, the extra options on here are. If you guys need to find out where certain lines are, you can also see what the statuses are, what the characteristics are, even including the owner name. If you guys wanted to zoom in really close and see who owns what in a certain area, you can see the owner's last name on there. Ferguson, Scott, Benuelos, so on and so forth. You can see what the trends are, seeing what the median sales price is for certain areas. If we zoom out really far, we can actually see these overarching kind of numbers indicating, what certain areas are worth. There's a little map down here at the bottom to indicate those numbers. Anyway, really cool features. I'm going to clear all of those off though, and only set back my parcel, because parcel is the only one that I would recommend leaving on all the time. All right. Anyway, I've got my listings ready. We're going to now start talking about these actions down at the bottom. So I'm going to head to my results page. Let's take a look at these checkboxes over here on the left. At the moment, my actions tab down here is not showing me any options for me to be able to use. So I don't have the option to start emailing things or set up a CMA. The only thing I really can do is go back to my criteria to adjust them or start running stats on the search that I created. We discussed this in our advanced matrix and realist class, so I'm not going to be working with that right now. It's not something that people use too often anyway. Instead, let's actually find out how to get these other options available, because maybe I need to send something off to a client, print something off for somebody, so on and so forth. That's actually going to require us to start using these checkboxes. As soon as I check a few of these off, you notice that it's starting to allow me to do extra things down here at the bottom. So I've got 4 checked right now. I want to send these off to somebody that I just met. So I'm going to click on email, and I can put in their email address right up here at the top. There we go. I can put in an email address and then put in a subject. Go check these out. Excellent. Now, there's a couple different things with sending stuff to clients that I want to address while we're on this page. First and foremost, you guys do have the option to just put in an email address, fire and forget. I do not suggest using that as your default option. What I would strongly suggest that you guys do is always use this create a new contact button, because more likely than not, if you guys have met this person and you've gotten their email address, you probably already have the other required pieces of information. So when I hit create new contact, I have the option to put in first, last, and email address. Those are the required options. We can change the salutation. So I like mine being a little bit more casual. And then there's also a bunch of extra fields that you can add as well. But notice the only things that are, again, required are first, last, and email address. So I would suggest if you guys are going to send something off, create them as a contact first, and then send it off to them. So for instance, if this was john@true.com, I'm going to just go create a new contact. John Jacobs, john@true.com. There we go. Now, the primary reason for making sure that we have them set up as a contact is because if I send this off as just a one-off, where I just dump in the email address, send, and that's it, this isn't going to allow them to really interact with that listing at all. They can see the information, they can find out more about it if they want to, but they're not going to be able to save it as a favorite, add comments, or even really get back in contact with you about that particular listing. It's only going to show them your contact information in general, and that's it. No interaction level at all. Instead, if we set them up as a contact, so like instead of it just being that email address, I created a contact, put his name in there. This is going to allow him to have his own interface, his own one home account, and to be able to indicate to you which ones he likes. So if this was something that he really loved, one of those 4 listings was the perfect home for him, he can save it as a favorite, he can add notes, he can request a showing. There's a whole bunch of different options for them. So just keep that in mind whenever you guys are going through the system and adding people. If you just send off, fire and forget, it's probably not going to be as good for your client as if you were to do the create as a contact. Now we're going to talk a little bit more about the contacts in a couple minutes here, but I'm going to leave it at that. Let's actually go ahead and cancel. Oh, actually, I'm going to send this to him. Just send that out. Hopefully that's not somebody's real email address. So when we send stuff off to people, it isn't a real email address, by the way, just to clarify. When we send stuff off to people like this, what's going to end up happening is that this is going to keep track of everything that you guys have sent. There is a refine option here. It's going to allow you guys to keep track of what you guys have sent off to people. So for instance, if I wanted to see what I just sent off, so I got that John Jacobs right here. When I switch over to that, it's going to show me that I've got those 4 emails that I just sent off. If I go back to actions, we also have extra options here as well. But notice as soon as I start leaving and doing other things, it's still leaving this John Jacobs up there. So it's a really easy way to kind of keep track of any of the listings. So if I did a different search and was searching for other properties, I can still come back and see whether or not I had sent that to him yet or not. I can also clear out of that, and that'll get rid of those extra columns. Now, we also have a print function available to us. If we want to print something, there's a huge variety of different reports, and you guys are going to notice something that might seem familiar. Remember that simple with acres custom view that I did for the results earlier? That's actually available for me to use as a print option. We also have some that are going to be for agents only. So bear that in mind that there's a bunch of these that are just for agents' eyes only. It might include information that the clients cannot see, like broker remarks or what the showing schedule is, compensation amounts, et cetera, et cetera. Instead, always make sure that when you guys are printing stuff off for clients, you use the client versions of things. There's some extra guides that we need to make you guys aware of when it comes to the printing options, especially after we came through with the change to increase our character count for the public remarks. So just keep that in mind. When I send off the recording for the class, it's going to include some extra information on that. Additionally, we also have a couple of reports down here towards the bottom. The quick CMA 8.4, which is the current one, and the 3-up comparison. Just so you guys are aware, you can actually include all of the details that you guys want by using that control click, or again, if you guys are on a Mac, command click. So if I wanted to do a 3-up comparison and a quick CMA, and I also wanted to include the full with all photos, I can select all of those, print to PDF. This is going to allow me to see all 3 of those different reports combined into one PDF for my client. So it makes it really easy to kind of gather all of the information up, get it into a format that your client will appreciate, and send that their way. It just also happens to be a little bit of a long-winded process. If I were to just email this information off, it'd be pretty much instantaneous. I could just fire and forget. Anyway, so there's some extra options in there that you guys might need to explore, but if you guys have any problems or questions, you can always reach out to us. If we do select some items, it's also going to allow us to create a full CMA report or just the quick CMA, which is even quicker than the option I just used. You do also have a directions option. You can export these out to Excel if you want, or if you guys needed to put together a showing cart in showing time, you guys can use that function as well. Refine, as mentioned, is just going to be for our contacts interactions. We have a save option where we can save this as a search. The save search function allows you guys to just put in a search name and leave it at that. But you can also connect this to a specific contact if you wanted to. So Jacobs, go. And I'm going to enable this as a favorite search on my home page as well, so that when I have run this search and want to go back and take a look at it tomorrow or the next day after that, I come on to my homepage and I've got the Jacobs family search. I can jump right back into it. And notice it automatically set the refine because it was connected to a specific contact. So if I jump back in here tomorrow and wanted to send a couple extra of these listings, I can do so. Anyway, additionally, we also have a new auto email function. So under the save option, new auto email is going to take whatever this search was and turn that into an automatic sending. So whenever somebody adds a new listing into the system that happens to match my search's criteria, it'll automatically be sent out to my clients. So you just choose your client, put in a subject. It'll send out a welcome email to the client. They agree to that. And then every time a new listing is added, they're going to receive a recurring email. You can add some extra text about that. You know, if you see anything you like, get back in contact with me, that kind of stuff. A little further down on the page, you can also choose what the schedule is. I would very strongly suggest, at least while the market is being wild, to use the ASAP option. What this means is that within 15 minutes of a listing agent adding a new listing, that listing should go out to your client. That does mean that if somebody's burning the midnight oil, that they will receive an email in the middle of the night. But we also have another option, which is daily. This is not, again, the best option for this moment right now, but just so you guys are aware, it's a really good option for the rest of the time. All of the AM sendings are going to gather everything from the last time it sent an email to this time and just send it off at around 8 a.m. All of the PM ones are going to be sent out around 6 p.m. And then you guys also have a monthly option, which it's okay, I guess, but probably not going to get a sale out of that one. Anyway, so that's our auto email function. There's going to be a little bit more information on the email. Oop. I think my microphone just got disconnected. Can you guys still hear me? I'm hoping. Yeah, it looks like it's still receiving me. Okay, sorry about that. The final option is carts. This is something that we used to cover in our 3-hour class, but we don't cover it anymore. There is some information that I'll be sending out to you guys with the recording that'll cover that. Now, if we did end up wanting to jump back into any of the previous searches that we've done so far today, I can click on this recent searches option and see all of the ones that I did today, and then all of the ones that I'd done previously, either yesterday, the day before, whatever. It keeps up to 32 searches on here. So you guys can go back all the way to 32 searches ago. Some of you guys might blow through 32 in a matter of hours. Others of you might not go through that many in an entire week. But either way, that's how we have it set up. It's either going to be a week worth of data or it's going to be the last, so on. The last 32 searches. So if I wanted to jump back to this one where I had a specific map search set up, and go back into my results and see all of those from there. So it makes it really handy. All right, last thing we're going to be discussing is our contact information. So we discussed already how to send stuff off to people, even whenever you guys are actually creating something. So like if I wanted to create a report and send it off to someone, it'll offer to create a new contact. But that contact information is actually going to be found under My Matrix and then Contacts. Now you'll notice some other familiar options that we just discussed. You can save a search. Neat, I can find all of my saved searches, not just the ones that I've saved to my contacts or saved to my homepage. I can see all of the auto emails that I've set up. I can easily check the status of them in case a client says that they're not receiving any email that I've sent whatsoever, whether it was a one-off, sent to a contact, or even something that was sent off in an auto email. Any of the CMAs I've created, my listings, carts, and then there's a function called reverse prospecting that actually ties back in to our contacts. So let's jump into our contacts page. By default, let's zoom out just a little bit. There we go. All right, that's close enough. By default, it's actually going to be sorting these by the last name first. You guys can adjust this a little bit, but they actually oversimplified that a little bit too much, in my opinion. Anyway, we see a list of all of our contacts, their email information, how many saved searches or auto emails we have for them. We can also see whether they have any carts, any of the notes that they've added to listings, which I can literally just click on the listing notes and find out more about it. See any of the ones that they've favorited or liked in the past, and I just click on this little post-it note icon to find out what the information was. Click back on their name to go back. You can also click on any of the individual contacts and navigate in between them. Use the arrows up here at the top, and it shows all of their own information within here. So what items they've favorited, what items they've discarded, all of the listings that they've added notes to, any auto emails that you've set up for them, cards, CMAs you've created, and again, all of the emails that you've ever sent to that client. We find somebody I've actually sent stuff to. Here we go. Any of the searches that you've saved for them, you can actually see that, find the settings for it. So seeing how often this is going to be run, changing any of the criterias, running the results themselves, or just deleting this. And then finally, we also have a one home searches. So I mentioned earlier that when we were talking about sending a one-off email to someone, just sending an email to their email address, just kind of leaving it at that, no setup of a contact or anything else, um, they will not have access to searching within the One Home system. Now, the One Home searches in this case is actually showing us what this particular contact has actually been searching for. So that way, if they end up saving the search, you can actually just jump back into Matrix and find out what they've been searching for in case maybe they're not communicating all of their needs, or they're asking you to search for something, but then whenever they ask you about another property, it's not something that you sent to them. That means that they've been doing searches in the One Home system. And likely that means that they're also going to have some saved searches that you can kind of glean from to see what they're searching for and augment your own searches with that. I would suggest, if you guys have not yet, add yourself as a contact and send yourself a listing or two just to see what it looks like on the client's end. If you guys have been in any of my classes in the past, you've probably heard me repeat this before, but play with things. Get into the system, find out what it can do for you, and play with it. See what it can actually do, because there's a likelihood that if your client calls in and has a question about something that they're looking at, if you don't know what it looks like because you've never played with it, you've never interacted with that system, there's a very good likelihood you're not going to be able to help them much. So strongly recommend that you guys give it a try. Last thing that I wanted to mention is just this reverse prospecting. So remember earlier we were talking about the auto email. Anytime I set up an auto email and it sends off a listing to this client, the agent that had that listing will actually see that I have a client that's interested in their property, which means that they can reach out to me and they can find out whether or not that client wants to do a showing, whatever the case may be. Now, in case that kind of hit a red flag in your brain, the listing agent will not see your client's information. So not to worry, you guys are only going to be able to see your own contacts. You will not be able to see anybody else's, and they similarly will not be able to see yours. So that's about it for our class today. I wanted to thank you guys so much for joining us.